Morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School, and it's wonderful to have another business over breakfast this morning. I'm thrilled to have Brandon Smith back with us. You may remember that Brandon's sessions in the past he's spoken to us about building executive presence and the author versus editor approach, something that I keep in the back of my head. Today, he was going to give us his thoughts on best practices for presenting with clarity, confidence, and credibility. This Business Over Breakfast is actually a preview of our new upcoming course, Presenting with Confidence for Leaders, which is on August 18th and 19th. And we developed this course in response to business professionals telling us that presentation skills were an increasingly important area for them to develop and deepen their expertise in. In today's fast-paced, high-stakes business environment, the ability to present ideas clearly and confidently is very much a critical leadership skill. Whether you're leading a team meeting, pitching an idea to stakeholders, or speaking at a conference, today, Brandon's going to expose us to some proven strategies to help us communicate in those situations with greater clarity, project confidence under pressure, and build credibility with any of those audiences. As many of you know, Brandon Smith is an affiliate faculty at Goizueta Business School and an award-winning business instructor, TED Talk presenter, executive coach, and author of two great books, The Hot Sauce Principle and The Author versus Editor Dilemma. For almost 20 years, Brandon has helped organizations improve the health and functioning of their workplaces, while also coaching business professionals to build leadership competencies and sharpen communication skills that set the stage for greater influence and impact in their careers. I wish I'd met you 20 years ago, Brandon. Brandon's going to spend about the first 30 to 35 minutes sharing his insights and perspectives, and then we'll follow that with a Q&A. So please post your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. And if you're interested in building your skills in this area of presenting, please consider joining that upcoming Presenting with Confidence for Leaders on August 18th and 19th. It's very much a practical, hands-on course focused on having you walk away with the tools to structure your message, manage nerves, and deliver with presence. And registration is still open, but only open until August 14th, is what I've been told. Also, coming up in September is another really critical skill builder, which is negotiation. So negotiation strategy for success, and we'll put information on both of those courses in the chat for you. So without further ado, Brandon, over to you.
Nicola, thank you. All welcome. Really excited to be with you all here today. Hopefully, I am a familiar face to you, as this is not my first time on Business Over Breakfast. This may be my fourth time, I believe, fourth or fifth. But today we're talking about something different and something new. We're going to be talking about presentation skills and executive presence in the sense of how do you actually stand up and present. And as Nicola said, we're really excited. I've got my colleague here, Sue Anthony. I'm going to introduce Sue in just a minute. We're going to be co-leading that course in just a few weeks. And it's really a practical course. It's an opportunity for you to come in and workshop some of the critical messages leaders have to develop. So specifically, we're going to talk about how do you do a quarterly business review? Or maybe you lead a nonprofit and how do you present your updates to the board? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how do you lead change, whether you're the messenger and deliverer of change, or you've kind of been told from above you need to do this. So how do we do that? How do you even tell your own story? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And there's even space in the course for you to bring kind of your own, choose your own adventure topic and workshop and get wonderful feedback from ourselves and our colleagues. So Nicola went through my background. I'm not going to share much as it relates to that, other than I've been teaching communication courses at the business school for nearly 20 years. And presentation skills is naturally one of those things that I've had the opportunity and fortune to be able to teach. And joining me, because there is no way I could do this course by myself, I have the wonderful privilege of having my colleague, Sue Anthony, joining me and helping to co-lead that course. So Sue, I would love for you to just share a few words with the group and maybe say a little bit about your background.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. My name is Sue Anthony. I'm a speech language pathologist and an executive coach. I've been coaching business professionals for over 20 years, and my focus is helping people be in control of the impression that they create about themselves and also be effective in getting your message through to your listeners and your audience, whether that's a one-on-one or a small group meeting or a large group meeting. But that's what I've been doing for the last 20 years, and I'm really excited to be co-leading this program with Brandon, and I hope you'll seriously consider in joining us. I want to echo what Nicola and Brandon said about the practicality of this program and really the application of what you learn to your everyday work life. Thanks, Brandon.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sue. So today you'll get a little bit of a sneak peek into some of that content. But remember, the course is all about application. So it's a good 80, 90% you actually practicing and getting feedback. And frankly, that's how we get better. So for today, we're going to talk about best practices for presenting with clarity, confidence, and credibility. And to set this up a little bit, I'm going to share something that will be familiar with a few of you. We've got a few objectives for us here in our morning session here. We're going to talk about what does it mean to present with clarity, confidence, and credibility. We're going to discuss some practical ways to strengthen one's presentation skills and presence in those big moments. And then identify, again, one thing you could be doing more of or differently. So if you come away with one takeaway from today, that is a good use of your business over breakfast time here this morning. So I set up every one of my communication sessions with just a quick highlight on a few communication core principles. And I think this is an important starting place for us. So when we are wearing the leader hat, we're communicating the why. When we're wearing the manager hat, we're communicating the how. And when we're doing these big presentations where we're delivering a quarterly business review or we're kind of initiating change, we've got to make sure we communicate that why. It's so very, very important because people need to understand our rationale. They understand our rationale, they're more likely to trust us. If they don't understand our rationale, they're going to have questions. So it's just a good reminder for us that making sure we communicate the why is going to be key. And I'll also say, even in context, when I coach leaders and they're delivering presentations to, say, the executive team, and typically in those situations, they may be given only 5 minutes, for example. You get 5 minutes with the executive team, give kind of an update of your business unit. They tend to jump right in and just go right into the update. And they miss the opportunity to talk about bigger picture, which kind of why hits. And so usually if they just put in that one slide around strategy before they do their business update, they're seen as strategic leaders. And it's a simple tweak, but the funny thing is if they don't do that and they jump right into those operational updates, they're seen as they're good at operational execution. They really can't go any further. So structure and how we communicate matters a lot. I'll be sharing a little bit more about that in a moment. So that's our first principle. Our second principle is a good life truth for us in absence of communication. People almost always assume the worst. And that is a very important reminder for us when we are going through states of change, for example. So John Kotter, who's one of the famous kind of gurus in the change management space, when he talks about his 8 steps for leading change, one of his steps is communicate, communicate, communicate. And I used to think in my younger days, John was saying, you gotta communicate a lot in states of change. I've come to realize in my latter days, in my more gray hair days or white hair days, that he's being literal. 3x communication when we go through states of change. So making sure we keep those communication channels open is key. And so we can see here that we're already starting to paint a picture of the importance of communicating, but also the importance of creating a regular, consistent intentionality behind it. And when we live in a world where time's our most precious resource and everything's urgent all the time, that's one of the first things that goes. Not only communication, but even the structure for it and having that rhythm to it. So a good reminder for us as leaders, we've got to have a rhythm of communication. And depending upon the state of the organization, that rhythm may change. Here's principle number 3. Dysfunctions like a fungus lives in dark places. We want to clarify expectations to eliminate it. also very, very important for us as leaders. And it's a great opportunity for us to drive that level of clarity. And that's also where that confidence and credibility comes in, is when we are very, very clear on what we expect, very, very clear on the vision that we're going down, very, very clear on even the culture that we're trying to set. As it relates to author editor, we don't have to be prescriptive on the how, but we need to be prescriptive on the why, the what, the when. Our military friends would call that commander's intent. So we got to make sure that we're very, very clear on that as well. A few more principles for us. Principle 4, leadership is all about striving for being efficient and effective, speed and quality. Speed and quality, and naturally, in a world of urgency, we tend to go fast. Speed tends to kind of rule the roost. And there's nothing inherently wrong with going fast. However, you can go too fast. And when we go too fast, that's when communication often suffers. We lose those rhythms. We forget to recognize the people doing great work, or aligning with the people to our left and to our right. So just a good reminder for us, just like every work stream, communication's got to be a work stream too. We need to have that on our calendars and on our radar, depending upon our role as leaders and the need of the organization. Principle 5, leadership's all about moving from working in the business to on the business. It's going from kind of doing the work to leading the work, going from kind of winning MVPs on the field to going for a world championship as a head coach. That's a nice kind of way to think about leadership in that journey. And again, the more we move into that head coach role, the more these critical communication moments occur for us, and we want to be prepared for those. And then finally, principle 6, leaders put energy into a system. So Nicola mentioned this. I did a TED Talk a few years ago on the contagiousness of emotions in the workplace. And there's been a growing body of research on that since the mid-1990s. It turns out not all emotions are equally contagious. If you're curious, the most contagious emotion in the workplace is fear or anxiety. And if we're a leader, it's like 2x or 3x. So we just want to be really, really aware of how we're arriving, how we're showing up, and the energy that we're bringing. And that's one of the wonderful things that Sue and I get the pleasure of doing when we're working with all those folks who are going to be joining us in just a few weeks, is helping them not only on the message, but also matching their energy to that message, because that's so very important. We not only want people to hear it cognitively and intuitively and kind of get what we're saying, we want them to feel a certain way. There was a gentleman out in Stanford named Bob Sutton, the famous faculty member out there, and he was telling a story a few years ago on a group of consultants that had done a piece of research on effective managers. And the question that they added in their research at the last minute, they thought was a throwaway question. And the question was, after you spend time with your manager, how do you feel? Turns out that was the most important question to determine whether or not that manager was effective and engaging and able to kind of lead the team effectively. How do you feel? It doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to feel happy and positive. It just means you feel kind of energized or inspired or motivated. Even if the message is tough, you feel ready to go. And when we deliver these messages that are kind of high impact messages, we want to make sure people feel a certain way. If we need them to go off and take action, we want them to feel motivated and inspired to do that. And channeling our energy is key around that. So that's kind of a precursor to our time here today. So I'm going to kind of move us down the path a little bit. Whenever we are communicating anything in a business context, there are 3 parts to it. We're going to talk about structure, content, and then style. Okay, so structure, content, and style. We're having a one-on-one with a team member, structure, content, style. We're going to deliver a quarterly business review, structure, content, and style. We're going to get up and tell our story, structure, content, and style. So it really is key whether we're sending an email or we're doing a presentation. And I would argue that this is the right order of importance. Structure is most important. We need that to match the audience and be a very clear box. The analogy I often think about that is it's kind of like, imagine going to the grocery store and you've got a list. I happen to grocery shop every weekend for my parents. My dad's 91 and my mom's 87. And I go grocery shopping for them and they give me this list. If I go in there without a cart, I am going to have stuff in my arms falling out as I try and get out of that grocery store. Our structure is essentially the cart we take into the grocery store. It helps us to hold that necessary information and still and leave with it, not have it kind of falling out of our arms. If we don't have good structure, folks aren't going to be able to hold on to what we're giving them. It's not going to be logical. It's not going to be easy to remember. Structure's key. Content is like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Not too much, not too little, just right. And I've got a student example I'm going to share with you from years ago on that journey of content. And then style and professionalism is how we deliver that information. Not only making sure that we're bringing energy and passion, but also mapping it to the proper context. So there should be a somberness or seriousness. We have to deliver bad news versus maybe an opportunity where we want to be exciting and energizing. So mapping that. As a leader shared with me some years ago, she said, I know I need to light a fire in my people, which is inspiration, but sometimes I need to light a fire under them too, which is urgency. And knowing when and how to do that is important for us as leaders. So just to kind of go down the path, a little bit of structure first, give you a little taste of some examples of that. As we're thinking about presenting to senior leaders, right, whether it's our leadership team or maybe a board, often these are some of the myths that I commonly hear and have commonly heard from a variety of students in our MBA programs over the years. Often folks this first myth is I must build my case in my communication before I tell them the purpose. In other words, I'm going to save the punchline to the end. Senior leaders really don't like that. If it was a mystery novel, or a murder novel, they want on the first page, tell them who did it. And then you can tell them the story of how you figured that out. They don't want to go all the way to the end. So that's why we lead with executive summaries. So very important in our structure. I need to show them all the data that I gathered. More is better. Not necessarily. And a colleague of mine years ago, she worked at Target for a period of time, and she said in Target headquarters, they had a saying that with every level up, you increase the font size of your presentation. And naturally, that sure that has to do with us needing these guys over our lifetime. But the point isn't just about our eyesight as we get older. The point really is about we don't need to get that level of granular detail when we're presenting to the C-suite. We need to be prepared to answer a question related to that, but we need to give them more of the bottom line. It's just so they have the information they need to make decisions. That's really the purpose. I don't need to communicate anything that senior leaders already know. Not true. As I mentioned to you before, yes, of course they know the strategy, but they want to know you know the strategy. And so it's important to make sure that we're connecting a status update with strategy. And then finally, I should be deferential and wait to be asked questions. Perhaps, but we don't want to be overly deferential in these presentations. We want to show that we have confidence and that we have that level of credibility. And we do that by maybe asking questions of the audience, of the group, or making it very clear that we are not afraid to handle those questions. So when we think about the questions that senior leaders often ask themselves before any kind of presentation that we're doing, they're saying things like, well, why am I receiving this? What's the purpose or point of this? Do I agree with the assumptions and conclusions that have been made? They want to see your logic when you're leading them up to a recommendation or an answer. And then what do I need to do with this information? So what are you asking them to do? Are you asking them to make a decision? Are you just providing an update? What are you asking of them? So I and we share these questions with you because when we're designing our communication, we want to meet all these questions off the pass. Our structure should be set up to address these so we can be prepared and make it very clear on that journey where we're taking them and why and exactly what we're asking of them. It's not a bad thing to say that. Today, I'm here to ask you to make this decision or get you to think about these opportunities. So this does tie into something that Nicola mentioned before, author editor. If you've joined me in prior Business Over Breakfast sessions, you may remember my author over editor concept, which was the kind of the foundation and basis for the book I published in 2022, The Author versus Editor Dilemma. Nice way of thinking not only about how we sit in the right seats with our team, but also how we present. So the short version of the concept is simple. Whenever there's a direct report and a leader, in that dynamic, someone has to sit in the author seat and someone has to sit in the editor seat. And the key is to know what seat to sit in when. So when we're in that leader seat with our teams, we need to make sure we're in the editor seat 80% of the time. And that's the seat that we want to sit in, and only the author seat 20%. Essentially, we want them to bring us things, and we're going to edit that. And we think about our all-time best direct reports. That's what they do. They come to us and they say, "Hey, there's a problem or issue. Here's what I'm thinking about it, and I'd love to get your thoughts." They author a solution for us to edit. And our not so effective direct reports say, "Hey, there's a problem or issue. What do you want me to do about it?" And it sounds innocent, but what they're doing is they're reeling us into that author seat. And now we're either doing the work for them or telling them what to do because, after all, things are urgent, moving fast, and we jump in and do it for them. And then over time, that obviously plays out in some ineffective ways. So when we sit in the editor seat, obviously we're still setting those clear expectations. That's another thing we need to make sure we're communicating. We're authoring those, we're coaching those authors to develop their thinking and their problem-solving abilities. We don't solve the problem for them, and we do this regularly with our teams. It helps to elevate their performance. But the real reason why I'm sharing this concept or refreshing us on this concept today is because of the author seat. So I'll pull up some of the traits of the author seat. The author, we know we've got a natural author on our hands because they take ownership, they show initiative, they display critical thinking. Okay, that's a quick back of the envelope way to identify a high potential in your organization or your team. They present recommendations and a point of view for feedback or editing. They don't say, "What do you want me to do?" And the folks that do this, naturally the ones that get tapped for future opportunities. All right, so as it ties into our content today and the course that Sue and I are going to be leading in a few weeks, in a perfect world, the way the system should work is we author up, we edit down. We author up, we edit down. Everyone on this call probably is a natural author. You see ownership, initiative, and critical thinking. I mean, you did take time today to join Business Over Breakfast. So you're taking ownership and initiative around your own personal growth and development as leaders and professionals. And it's a good reminder for us that we need to be doing those author skills with our leaders, whether we have our direct leader, the senior team, or a board. We need to make sure we're authoring up, and we're presenting kind of not only status update and a point of view around that, but also recommendations. And if we're presenting to senior teams and boards, we would also include an executive summary, and we might even go into more detail on ROI, might do sensitivity analysis around some of the recommendations, and even talk about next steps and implementation plans. But being able to kind of lay that logic out is important when we author up. So when we're presenting to senior leaders, again, before we jump into any of those, we want to make sure we're asking ourselves, what exactly is the best method or channel should we use? Whether it's email, a leave behind deck, we're going to have a meeting in a conference room, or maybe even executive team presentation. For those of you that haven't heard the term leave behind deck, it's essentially a consulting term, and this is what a lot of consulting firms do when you hire them, is they may do a presentation, but they're going to give you a formal leave behind deck, which has lots of detail in it. In other words, it's almost like a written document, but it's PowerPoint. It was not ready for presentation. It's 10-point font kind of PowerPoint slides. So you wouldn't present that, but you would hand it to somebody for reading and reference material, either before a presentation to get them up to speed or after the presentation as a follow-up. But that can be a tool that we may decide to use depending upon the situation. So implications on structure. So when we're presenting to senior leaders, structure again is really important. We want to clearly state the purpose and recommendations up front. Here's why I'm here today. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Your presentation to have a transparent, logical flow. So we want to talk about kind of the situation, talk about how we assess that, our point of view, and then recommendations we might have. We want to keep it succinct and concise. And then finally, using that old training adage, we're going to tell them what we're going to tell them. We're going to tell them, and then we're going to tell them what we told them. Really, really important, because often when you're presenting to a senior team, we are the fourth or fifth presenter, and there's about 13 presenters or 14 presenters that afternoon. So we want to make sure that while this is a sharp group, they really remember exactly what we told them, and they know exactly what we're asking them to do. So we want to be clear in that way we do it. In case you'd like a little bonus nugget today, here are some best practices in terms of structure with emails. So that's always an opportunity, frankly, for all of us these days. Um, AI tends to follow a lot of these pretty well, but it's just a good reminder for us when we're utilizing an outline format in the body of an email. So we want to enumerate. It's subtle things like this that Sue and I will work with you all on if you join the course. When do you use bullet points versus enumeration? Often I'll see people use bullet points and not recognizing that when you bullet point a list, you're indicating to the group, these are all equal. You can do them all right now. Whereas enumeration creates more of an order. So we may want actually an order to be communicated. We utilize those bullets when there's communicating a list or points for consideration, but not maybe a batting order. Be intentional to utilize the address line. So, who are we sending it to? CC is good for other folks, and then we might blind copy again for discreetly looping folks in. And then, of course, utilizing bolding, underlining, highlighting text, all those kinds of tools that we need because when everything's urgent, we tend to skim and scan things. And so make everything skimmable and scannable. The last thing we want to do is send an email that's just paragraphs of our thinking. So it reminds me of one of my all-time favorite quotes, often attributed to Mark Twain, but no one really knows who said it. Relates really well to email. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time, which speaks to the point of that finished thinking takes that extra level of time. So it's nice and tight and crisp and clear, and folks can remember it. Okay, so that's a little, just some nuggets on structure, get you thinking a little bit about structure. Content would be the other area. I'm just going to share this with you all as kind of an example. When we think about content, we can use this example of unfinished versus finished thinking. Okay, and there's three kinds of content. Type one, it's directional, but there's not a lot of meat to it. And sometimes we think we're putting meat on something, but we really aren't. Type two, we are giving them everything. We are giving them everything. And if you all come from a technical background, whether it's accounting, finance, engineering, IT, even legal, you can have a tendency to fall into type two, where we almost overdo on that content. And then finally finish thinking, that's Goldilocks and the Three Bears, just right. So I'll run you through a quick example. So when I was, I'll just pull these up. Yep. When I was teaching some years ago, I had a student that came to me, and I was actually able to take the student through this entire journey of unfinished type one all the way to finished thinking. So common elements around unfinished thinking is we do just bullets, or it's resemble a brainstorming or draft deck, or it can be generic due to a lack of specificity. So we want to make sure that we're not being too general or generic. And this happens even as senior leaders. We do this. I've been working with a lot of my clients on some of their decks, and they'll have statements that are general, they think are specific, but they're really generalities with lots of beliefs and assumptions built into them. So here's an example. This student brought me this presentation, and this was some of their unfinished thinking type one. So you can see they were giving a proposal, and here were the reasons. Smaller customers have been entering the market space. Well, what does smaller customers mean? We're losing market share. Well, how much market share are we losing? And the customers are complaining about our approval process. Well, who is complaining? What are they complaining about? So they talked a little bit about some of the current process. You can see that general theme. There's no real numbers here. There's no metrics. A lot of statements, but not a lot of substance underneath it. So we can't tell, is this a big problem or a little problem? And then they had some general, again, here we have a cost benefit slide, and there's no numbers on this cost benefit slide. So that's a bit of a challenge. We're trying to make decisions. So naturally, I told that student to go back and add a little more meat to the bones of that presentation. Let's see what we could do. Gave them a few more tips. And they came back with type two unfinished thinking. And they said, all right, they came back with multiple graphs and charts on the same slide. Again, good for a leave behind deck, not good for a presentation to senior teams. Includes analysis as well as bottom line results. So it had everything on it. And then lacks clear focus and interpretation of content. Okay, so they took that first presentation and they came back, and you can see the first slide saying that didn't change. Second slide, okay, now we get into this party. And so you can see they've done some work here, but just by scanning it, it's very difficult to really follow the logic here. It's not really, there's a lot going on here. They've got arrows and they've got other elements here. So while they've done work, they haven't made it easy for the audience to get what they're looking at. They did this slide here, which you can also see quite a lot going on here. The spirit of the slide was to say, here, our current process is a mess. Future process will be much tighter and organized. But there's a lot on one slide. And then their cost benefit slide. While it had numbers, they were comparing some different numbers from costs and benefits. What just wasn't very tight. So again, I challenged them. Go back, take one more pass at it. Let's see if we can get to finish thinking. And finish thinking as a clear, logical focus and interpretation, elegant simplicity of data, charts, and graphs, high level and some supporting evidence only. We can use appendix slides if we want to add more detail. And if you're ever doing presentations to senior teams or team presentations, the magic is really in the appendix slides. So you may have 20, 25 slides for the actual presentation and 50 to 100 slides in the appendix, just to be able to anticipate possible questions and show that you're prepared. So had that same student go off. They came back. Here's what they came back with. Cover slide didn't change. All right, now we got a picture that we can easily see and get it. So you can easily, our eyes can go to 2007 and go, there's a problem there. I can see that, and we're comparing apples to apples in a nice, clean, easy way. So it's scannable and easy to get up to speed with what they're trying to communicate. And this is also an important reminder for us when we are presenting to leaders. When you are presenting, just like I am here today, you're basically hitting folks with two different types of communication. You and what's coming out of your mouth, and then typically your slides, which should be supporting you. It's almost like you're an actor on the stage. This is your set, okay? Sometimes we end up getting those two things confused, and we make the set the primary audience or the primary attention grabber, and then we're kind of background. So we want to make sure that we're complementing each other well, not competing with each other. And when you have a complicated, messy slide, you're telling the audience, stop listening to me and try and make sense of this mess I put on the screen. So to that end, instead of having one slide that had all those processes on it, they broke them into two. They showed one slide to show, here's our current process, show the messiness of it, and then showed a second slide to show, here's where we want to go. And then finally, their cost benefit slide, much tighter, much more clear, and hitting some of those kind of main areas there of focus, both payback period and internal rate of return. So we've got kind of those clearly stated there. So again, it's a matter of kind of tightening it down, finish thinking, make it nice and clean. Okay, so in fairly short order, gave you some examples and some ideas around structure, gave you some examples and idea around content. Now, again, the spirit of today is to give you a little teaser and taste into this, but the actual beauty of what Sue and I are going to be doing is actually the opportunity to get you to personally shape the work that you're delivering. And so the last piece here is style and professionalism. I don't have much as it relates to slides on that for us here today, just for sake of time, but we all have nervousness that occurs for us when we present. I've seen folks, we kind of playfully in the business school, we have terms for some of these. So there's one is called kind of the gunshot wound, where you kind of hold on to a extremity really tightly as you're presenting as a way to comfort yourself. I've had folks kind of rock back and forth. That's been one. I've had folks that kind of move behind and grip tightly onto the podium. And then I've even had folks that kind of slowly, as the presentation goes, they slide closer and closer to the door, just in case things go south. they can get out the room. So understanding our body posture, how we're presenting, how we're standing up, how we're engaging the audience is also very important for our ability to not only keep them engaged and support the message, but come across as that confident, competent, clear, concise leader that we desire to be. All right, so I have one little other final piece of content for you here today. Now, as I mentioned, essentially the way that we're doing this 2-day course, it is a workshop course, and it's going to be one where you can jump in, and not only will we set up kind of some areas that all leaders need to get practice in, like quarterly business reviews or leading change, but we'll also talk about storytelling. Because storytelling is such a powerful tool for us as leaders. And one of the stories that if we have the opportunity to tell it, can be very powerful, is even telling our own story. So just to talk a little about stories, why we tell stories as another important tool for us as leaders. Well, as leaders, part of our responsibility is we're to create meaning out of ambiguity. That's really our job as leaders. And the higher up we go, the more ambiguous it is. It's messy. And we've got to kind of create some level of clarity. That's why we use stories or analogies to simplify that complexity. Because ultimately, as leaders, what we're trying to do, our goal, is we're stimulating action. We're not there to just communicate information. We are, but we're trying to get them then to do something with that information. Go down this path. Make this change to how you interact with customers. Make this change to how you interact with colleagues. Do your work differently in some way. So we're trying to stimulate action, and stories can be a great way to help people to get more comfortable with that and to remember what we're trying to do. It's one of the few tools we have as leaders that cuts across age, it cuts across culture, cuts across language and backgrounds, even cuts across kind of level of competency and business acumen. So while I mentioned internal rate of return, not every audience is going to know what that means, but every audience can understand a story. So we talk about the importance of storytelling and how to use that. This is just some types of stories. This comes from a gentleman by the name of Stephen Denning. Stephen Denning worked in the World Bank for a number of years, and he realized in such a political environment as the World Bank with so many competing agendas and so many different cultures, stories were important ways to connect across those barriers. And he argues there's 7 types of stories. We can use them to spark action, communicate who we are, transmit values. We can foster collaboration, tame the grapevine, in other words, kind of overcome rumors, share knowledge, and then leading people into the future. For our session here today, I'm going to hone in on communicating who you are, because telling our own personal story is so very, very powerful. When we use stories, we can, again, use them to simplify complexity, inspiring others, and building trust. This will be what we focus on in the course. We tell our story, we can do any of those things, but most importantly, build trust. Telling our own story is a great way to build trust. And when we do that, it ties into this trust formula many of you have probably seen before. I've shared this before in Business Over Breakfast. It's a formula I came up with back in 2008 when I was teaching full-time MBA students a little more regularly. And it's a great formula. It warrants its own discussion. But I will say, when we tell our own personal story, we're honing in on that authenticity and vulnerability side of the equation. And if done well, it actually enhances credibility. It makes you as a leader seem more credible. And so when we think about what makes an effective personal story, now there are a few elements. So for example, tell of overcoming an obstacle, be relatable, be authentic, be vulnerable, and provide some level of hope. We don't respond well to people telling stories that kind of start off with, life's been really great for me. I started off here and I just kept on going up. That's not really very relatable. It's not very reflective of the human condition. We tend to really love stories that have some kind of a dip, have that valley. So when that peak occurs, it's so much more rewarding and so much more fulfilling. And so being able to tell that story is so very, very important, and learning how to do that. So I'm going to model this for you in just a minute, but when should you tell your personal story? I'm going to break my rule here a little bit. Generally speaking, a personal story is a great way to accelerate and enhance trust after you've already had some time working with people. I often find when I'm working with leaders that have maybe been working with a team for a little over a minimum of 2 years or more, the team will start to say, I really like working with this leader, but I don't know anything about her or him. That's a great opportunity to tell your story. So you can kind of enhance that level of trust and deepen that understanding and that relationship. And it can be really powerful if you need people to really follow you into the unknown. You want them to know who you are. And it is hard to tell a personal story. I've been teaching this particular portion of this content here for well over 15 years in both full-time MBAs all the way up to executive MBAs. And I assign it as a homework assignment where they've got to write their 2-page version of their life and they've got to come back and present it. And they always say, not only is it scary and hard, it's one of the most powerful experiences that they get through their MBA because it's such an eye-opening experience, but also really powerful to hear each other's stories. So when we talk about how we do that, we're making sure we tell about those problems and we don't want to shy away from those. That's part of what makes us human. And that's what makes this so challenging. It's also why in the course that we'll be teaching in 2 weeks, it is the last thing we do. We kind of build up to this because it's one thing to talk about quarterly business results. It's another thing to talk about maybe those intimate or a little more vulnerable sides of your life. Now, you don't have to tell everything naturally, but telling pieces of it can be very, very powerful. Nicola, I see you on the screen.
Hi, Brandon. This is fabulous stuff. But Bennett did ask, how do you introduce a dip without it feeling inauthentic in your story? Do you
Yeah.
got any tips on that?
Yeah. So this is why practice is so important for telling your own personal story. If you tell your own personal story and you don't feel anything when you tell it, it's going to feel plastic. It's going to feel almost made up. So you have to feel it. What you feel, they feel. So the analogy I always use for folks is think about all the weddings you've ever been to in your lifetime. Okay. And then think about now the ones where you had the most fun. It probably didn't tie into how much money was spent on the wedding. It probably tied more into how much fun were the bride and groom having? Because they're actually the presenters or the event of that wedding. And they're feeling great, you're feeling great. So what you feel is what the audience is going to feel. So practice is important because you want to make sure you feel that, but it doesn't feel too overwhelming to you. So I'm going to model this for you. So here's, as we think about our stories, this comes from a guy by the name of Bill George, had been the former CEO of Medtronic, wrote and teaches on authentic leadership. And you can see this quote here: "The journey to authentic leadership begins with understanding the story of your life. Most authentic leaders reported that their stories involved overcoming difficult experiences and using these events to give meaning to their lives." So when I recommend folks tell their story, I give this structure. Talk about your origins. What was life like growing up? Your hardship. What was a particular obstacle or hardship that you had to overcome? Your resolve. As a result of your hardship, what decisions did you make about your life? And then your vision. So where are you going? So let me spend a couple minutes. I'll model this for you with my story, and then I'll let you decide. Do I, so I should I be the guy teaching this course or not? I'll let you all be the judge of that. So I'll start at the very beginning. So I was the youngest of 3 boys. My parents had two. They adopted 2 boys before me. My parents were told they couldn't have kids, and so my brothers were 13 and 11 years older than me when I came along. Kind of arrived on the scene. My dad worked for Mead Paper Company, so we moved around from paper mill town to paper mill town when I grew up. And if you've ever been in a paper mill town, you know it because it smells. It's got that kind of rotten egg sulfur kind of smell that they use to break down the pulp. And as I think about my life, I generally try and be optimistic and positive and say it was pretty good. But the reality of it was actually quite dysfunctional, my home life growing up. My oldest brother was in and out of jail or rehab centers my entire life. So when he was home, there was a tremendous amount of yelling and screaming. And my parents were just so overwhelmed with both my brothers that there wasn't much time for me. And so when we moved to Atlanta, and my oldest brother had been in a rehab center in Florida, and he decided to leave that, and he hitchhiked and He was living with us briefly. I was right around 10 years old. And he just decided life was too hard. And he went out one night and he hung himself and took his own life. And that was particularly traumatic for me and my family. So much so that I came down with a stutter, an uncontrollable stutter going into middle school, which I do not recommend. So every day before middle school, I was going to see my speech therapist, and I was working on either my B's or my P's or my T's, because if I had any word that began with any of those letters, I couldn't finish it. So my nightmare was always getting on the phone and ordering a pepperoni pizza because I could never get through that order. And so I was a skinny little kid. So you're a skinny little kid with a stutter, plus all that stuff going on with my home and the way other kids treat skinny little kids with stutters. I kind of decided, people were messy and frankly too messy for me to want to deal with. So I just kind of distanced myself from people and became a world-class wallflower all the way through kind of high school. I went off to college. Funny enough, I majored in communications. Uh, kind of wondering where that was going to take me. And like most good communication majors, I was unemployed at graduation. And I ended up taking a job with a small chain of retail stores. And it was a family-owned business. And so my boss was the son-in-law of the woman who started the business. So she started the business. Her daughter marries this guy. He's my boss. And at this point, my stutter has gone away, but my inclination for wanting to trust folks is probably not very high. So I go in on the first day of work, and he says, "Well, so glad to have you here. You're going to be the assistant manager of the store, but before you get started, I have a task for you in the back room. Waiting for you in the back room is the current manager, current assistant manager, but he doesn't know you're coming. So your job is to go back there, and you're to fire him, and then you get his job." And that was my first task on my first real day of work. And that was how my boss rolled. He'd come into the office, he'd say, or come into the store and he'd say, "Hey, I don't like what Janet is wearing. You need to go fire her." I did more layoffs in the first 6 months of that job than any other time in my career. And having that experience kind of woke me up and made me realize a couple things about my life. One, you can't always choose the families that you get. You kind of dealt with the families that you have, and you kind of work with that. But you have a lot more choice of the workplaces. Two, if my boss was any indication of the state of leadership in the world, I really want to change that. I really want to change how we lead and guide and coach and develop the folks around us. And three, that was where my purpose was born, that I wanted to cure and eliminate all workplace dysfunction everywhere forever, having no idea what I'd signed up for. So I ended up going to Georgia State. I got a clinical degree in therapy. I practiced in a clinical world for a number of years. I actually practiced at a facility called Ridgeview Institute, which was one of the places that my oldest brother, who had passed away, had stayed at. And then I transitioned into the workplace. And then I came to Goizueta and I got my MBA. And then I had the job offer during that time, but decided to turn it down, hung my shingle after graduation, and the rest is history. And so what most people don't realize about me is that even though I use my voice in everything I do, whether it's TED Talks or doing sessions like this or teaching or coaching, uh, and while I've done all those things and won numerous teaching awards and get feedback for my presence in the classroom, it is not a comfortable experience for me to be presenting in front of other people or even doing big presentations. I get nervous. I get really uncomfortable because I always think that stutter is going to come around the corner anytime. But I've learned ways to kind of manage through that. And so and because it's so important to me to be able to kind of give that message to others and to help people, it's motivating to me to kind of push through that discomfort. I'm sure I've left out a lot in my story, but it gives you a little sense of the structure and how you might use your story. So, as I said to you when I kicked that off, you can be the judge of after hearing my story of whether or not you think I'm qualified to be teaching this course or not. But it's my story. We all have some of them, and often when I tell my story, it has people see me differently. We make assumptions about people based on the way they look. And your story can be incredibly powerful for not only inviting people to follow you, but helping people to understand your motives and why you do what you do as a leader. So it's one of my favorite things to get an opportunity to teach because I've probably taught at least 1,000 students at this point on their stories. I haven't heard one that wasn't inspiring. We all have inspiring stories in us, and learning how and when to unlock those can be a truly, truly powerful tool for us to motivate and lead others, and such a gift that we can give to others. That piece of us that's human and that humanity. And adding that in with all the logic makes us really, really, really effective leaders. So I love this quote from John Cotter. Speaking of John Cotter, we mentioned him earlier. The challenge of simple and direct communication is it requires great clarity of thought plus more than a little courage. And I think that sums up a lot of what this is about. It's about really spending that time to think about how we're going to approach it, what's our structure, the content we're going to include, who's our audience, really thinking about that, but then having the courage to deliver those messages, either risky messages like telling our story or asking for resources, or those messages that just as leaders we're going to put a stake in the ground. So with that, I've been going on a little while today here. I always encourage in all these sessions for you to have your takeaway, whatever that might be, your stop, start, and continue. I'm going to now kind of hand the baton back to Nicola to see what other kind of questions or comments we might be able to take on in our remaining time here today.
So thank you, Brandon. There's the chat's been blowing up in terms of appreciating your story and the inspiration that that it provided for people. So I think you get an A+ for that. And
Everyone, did you hear that? That means Nicola's endorsing me to teach the class. You never know.
Of course, Brandon.
Thank you, Nicola.
Of course. Couple of things. Tony asked, are there any good examples or templates for PowerPoint or executive summaries that that could be accessed by the people here on the presentation?
So it really varies by your organization. Different organizations have different preferences. So I would reflect on or even ask around who's known for really doing this really well in our organization. That said, I would say for executive summaries, you typically want those to be 3 to 4 points. You don't want a lot of detail, and it's really just bottom line. I'm going to be asking for $1 million investment. We expect the ROI on that to be 7%, whatever happens to be. We're going to roll it out over the next 18 months. So we really want that to be tight and crisp. But in terms of other templates, it varies by preference. Consulting firms have a lot of their own preferences. We often lean on some of those when we teach this because they have some good best practices. But again, it varies by organization.
Right. And I appreciate this session this morning, Brandon, because we're putting together a presentation, and one of the pieces of feedback we've been getting is you're burying the line, you're burying the headline. Put the headline up the beginning. So good reminder. A question around how do you communicate, or have you got best practices or ideas for communicating more effectively with a hybrid workforce where you're not seeing each other on a day-to-day basis, where when you do see people on a Zoom or Teams or other live online sessions, it feels like a meeting, or it can feel like a meeting because it's structured and on your calendar. Have you got any tips for communicating as a leader in that environment?
Yeah, it's very, very hard. We've all experienced it. We all went through the pandemic. So what happens when we do virtual meetings or virtual teams, it always moves to being operational and not relational. Relational happens when we work with each other in an office because we bump into people in the hallway, we have lunch with people, we have the small talk. Virtual is not really conducive to small talk. So I would say it's really, really important when we do virtual that everything needs to be clearly explicit. So if you've got a meeting, there needs to be an agenda and a purpose for that meeting. If you want to have time for people to connect, then make that a separate call and meeting. Or have that in the agenda. We're going to spend the first 10 minutes and everyone's going to go around and share kind of a roses and thorns that's going on in their life right now. What's a rose? What's a thorn? Just an opportunity. My daughter, who graduated from University of Georgia last year, She picked up, I guess, in her sorority world, they'll say high, low, and buffalo. And Buffalo is just something out of the unusual. What's your high, low in Buffalo? We all went out to dinner last night as a family, and she asked everybody what's their high, low in Buffalo. But that's an example of a kind of a structured way to invite people to share things that would organically come up in working with each other, but aren't going to naturally do that. The other thing I would say is you really, really, really want to encourage people to have their cameras on. If we're gauging psychological safety on virtual teams, there's two things I look for. I look for cameras on, and I look for playful comments in the chat. If you're getting lots of playful comments in the chat and people have their cameras on, that's a sign they feel psychologically safe to fully engage, fully show themselves, and even be a little bit of playful. If folks have their cameras off and the chat is quiet, you've got a psychological safety problem. So those are just some tips to kind of flex that a little bit. And then, of course, try and find at least one time a year you can bring everybody together in person. That's a great opportunity to strengthen those trust muscles to keep you going. So,
I love that.
a few tips there.
I love that high, low, and buffalo. We might try that in my team. I think we've got time for one last question. Do you have recommendations for helping early career professionals start to build presentation skills, particularly those that are used to texting, TikTok, all of this, the technology that younger folks grew up with? How do we help them start to build these presentation skills?
Yeah, so the first thing naturally is structure. Structure is key no matter where we are in our career. Now, what's going to happen if we're more junior in our career and you're presenting to your leader? Let's say you're an analyst and your leader's the manager. They're going to want more detail. So a lot of what I presented here today has to do with presenting to senior teams. They want less detail, they want bottom line. If your manager is a little more in the weeds because of where they are in the organization, they're going to want more detail. But the short answer to this great question is find someone in the organization, ask around about someone who's really, really good at this, and just ask them out to lunch or learn more about how they do it. Because that's the best way for us to learn. Find something that's already working and make it your own. And so learn about their structure, learn about how they approach content, learn about what the organization, what matters to them. Every organization pays particular attention to certain metrics more than others. What matters most? So you can learn a lot by just looking for those mentors and those folks that are already good and learning from them. And frankly, that's what I did when I joined Exec Ed many, many, many years ago. First time I taught, we used to rank our faculty, and I came in towards the bottom, and I got with my colleagues like Steve Walton and Michael Sachs and said, "Hey, what do you all do?" And took lots of notes. And the next time I presented, I went up, and it was my way of learning was picking the brains of those really smart folks that have come before me and do a really good job.
I think the best executive educators that I've seen are the ones that do exactly that. Ask for feedback, collect the feedback, and over time get so much better. So thank you for everything you do for executive education, Brandon. I am going to hand over to Heather to close us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicola, so much for leading our discussion. And thank you, Brandon. I'll echo the so many comments in how authentic and vulnerable and how much we are so grateful for you doing that. So thank you for sharing today for a number of years and have had the opportunity to experience his expertise in many. Super grateful that we've had you here again today. One sec, looks like I'm causing me issues here. All right, so I am Heather Dufault. I am
Heather, it looks like your
I know.
internet is unstable. Do you want to just read out what are the upcoming
Yeah, I
business
will.
breakfast?
I will. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry I'm not going to share. So as always, we love that you spend your morning with us. Thank you so much. Please make sure you join us for our next Business Over Breakfast presentation on August 21st, which is why your best AI strategy is actually about relationships. So as we close today, let me remind you about a couple upcoming courses. First and foremost, our course coming up, Presenting with Confidence for Leaders, which we've talked about today. Brandon will be leading that. There is still time to join us. Registration is open until next Thursday, August 14th. So please make sure to join us for that. Please see the chat. They'll have a link in there directly to the registration. Also coming up in September, we've got our 2.5-day negotiation strategy for success course. And Brandon will also lead us with executive communication and leadership presence in October. And also for those who are considering a professional path as an executive coach, please consider our upcoming in-person executive coaching program, also beginning this October. Again, please see the email on the screen as it will have information for those courses and for you to be able to register. We would love to have you join us in the fall. So, and also today we have a special offer for our Business Over Breakfast participants in partnership with the Customer Data Alliance. We are offering an exclusive half-day in-person workshop in Atlanta, also on August 21st, titled Unlocking AI Maturity, Operational Readiness, and the Future of Work. This hands-on workshop will help you assess your team's AI readiness so that you can unlock your AI potential. You'll learn strategies to empower your team and help you reimagine the future of work in an AI-empowered world. So scan the QR code on the screen to learn more and if you'd like to register. So thank you again for spending your morning with us. Brandon, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. It is always a pleasure. And don't forget to join us. Our next Business Over Breakfast presentation is August 21st. So we hope to see you soon. And thank goodness it's back to school.